The alarm on Leo Maxwell's phone chirped softly at 4:30 a.m., a gentle insistence against the stillness of his small apartment. Even before the sun thought about gracing the sky, Leo was already up moving with a quiet purpose honed by years of single fatherhood. His apartment, nestled on the third floor of a crumbling brick building, was a testament to his meticulous nature. Though small and worn, every surface gleamed, every item had its designated place. The threadbare rug in the living room was vacuumed daily, the chipped countertop in the kitchen wiped clean of any stray crumb. It was his small, defiant stand against the encroaching disarray of the world outside. He walked to the kitchen, the familiar scent of stale coffee from yesterday's brew clinging faintly to the air. His first task was always the same: prepare breakfast and pack Maya's lunch. Today it was scrambled eggs carefully portioned, and toast with a thin smear of jelly. For Maya's lunch, he meticulously wrapped a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in wax paper, adding an apple sliced into neat wedges and a small bag of carrots. Every calorie, every nutrient was considered. He didn't just dump items into a lunchbox. He arranged them, ensuring a small hand-drawn smiley face adorned the napkin. He'd make his own coffee black and strong, then trace patterns on the condensation of the mug, a habit he had when his mind was churning with the relentless arithmetic of bills, rent, and school supplies. Sometimes a subtle tremor would run through his hand as he counted out the precise amount of coins for Maya's bus fare, a silent testament to the precarious balance of his finances. He always turned off lights in rooms he wasn't actively using, even during the brightest part of the day, a small, ingrained act of budgeting. Maya, a miniature version of him with her quick wit and bright, curious eyes, would emerge from her bedroom around 5:30 a.m., still sleepy but already buzzing with childlike energy. Their mornings were a sacred ritual: shared breakfast at the tiny kitchen table, Maya recounting fragments of fantastical dreams, Leo listening with a patience that defied his inner anxieties. He'd walk her to the bus stop, his hand warm and firm around her small one. The bus would rumble to a stop, its hydraulic hiss a familiar sound. He'd watch her climb aboard, her bright pink backpack a beacon disappearing into the school-bound crowd. Then the silence. The profound, echoing silence of the apartment after she left. The way he lingered at the door for a few extra moments was perhaps the clearest indicator of his quiet loneliness. No other presence, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant city sounds. His neighborhood, though labeled bad by outsiders, was more economically depressed than inherently dangerous. It was a mosaic of peeling paint, boarded-up storefronts, and cracked sidewalks, but also of resilience. People here knew hardship, but they also knew community. Leo recognized most faces on his walk to the construction site: the weary elderly, the young mothers pushing worn strollers, the men heading to early shifts. He offered a polite nod, a brief smile, never lingering, never inviting too much conversation. He kept to himself, a silent observer. One particular morning, as the first blush of dawn painted the sky, Leo saw Mrs. Gable. She was a frail, elderly woman who lived 2 floors below him, a fixture of the neighborhood for decades. She was struggling. Her arms, thin as twigs, were wrapped around 2 overflowing plastic grocery bags, their contents threatening to spill. She edged slowly up the crumbling concrete steps leading to her apartment, the broken railing beside her a useless support. Leo checked his watch. He was already running a little late for work. His foreman, a burly man named Gus, didn't tolerate tardiness. But Leo didn't hesitate. He knew the cost of being late, but a deeper, more ingrained instinct took over. Without a word, he quickly crossed the street. "Mrs. Gable let me get that for you," he said, his voice low and kind. Before she could protest, he gently took the bags from her, their weight surprisingly heavy. "And this railing looks a bit loose," he added, pulling a small multi-tool from his pocket. In a few deft movements, he tightened the screws, making it secure once more. "Oh, Leo, bless your heart." Mrs. Gable wheezed, her eyes twinkling with gratitude. "You're always doing for folks. Here, let me give you something for your trouble." She fumbled in her purse, pulling out a crumpled dollar bill. Leo shook his head, a genuine, easy smile on his face. "No trouble at all, Mrs. Gable. Just glad to help." He helped her inside, placing the groceries on her kitchen counter, and then quickly left, not wanting to draw attention to his small act of kindness. This save the cat moment was less about proving his goodness to an audience, and more about a deeply embedded part of his character, his innate kindness and unwavering moral compass. He simply couldn't stand by when he could offer help. As he continued his brisk walk to work, his mind still on the day's tasks, his eyes unconsciously registered anomalies in the familiar urban landscape. He saw a sleek, dark luxury sedan entirely out of place, parked incongruously on a street usually lined with battered sedans and rust-eaten pickups. It had tinted windows, and its polished surface reflected the grim morning light like a dark mirror. He glanced at it, then dismissed it. He also caught a fleeting glimpse of a heavily tattooed man, his posture too rigid, talking animatedly into a small satellite phone near the abandoned warehouse that bordered the old industrial district. The man's face was obscured, but his demeanor was sharp professional. Leo's gaze lingered for a second, a fleeting flicker of something akin to recognition, or perhaps simply intuition, before he shrugged it off. This wasn't his business. He had a job, a daughter, and a life to keep meticulously in order. He ran a hand over his forearm, rubbing unconsciously at a faint, almost illegible tattoo, partially hidden by the sleeve of his work shirt, just above his watch. It was a small geometric design, faded almost to obscurity, a ghost of a symbol from a past he never spoke about, a life he had deliberately chosen to leave behind. He had carved out this quiet, dignified existence for himself and Maya, far from the echoes of that former world. He just didn't know how thin the veil between his two lives was about to become. He was about to discover that the world he tried so hard to escape had a way of finding its way back, often at the most inconvenient times, and often through the most unexpected encounters. The day at the construction site dragged on each swing of the hammer, a rhythmic echo of Leo's quiet anxieties. The weather forecast had warned of a severe storm, but nothing could have prepared the city for the sheer ferocity with which it descended. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a sickly, bruised purple, and a chilling wind whipped through the urban canyons. Leo felt the shift in the atmosphere, a familiar prickling sensation on his skin that always preceded something significant, though he couldn't have articulated why. As the first fat drops of rain splattered against his hard hat, signaling the end of his shift, the heavens opened. A relentless downpour instantly transformed the grimy streets into swirling torrents. Thunder cracked overhead, a deafening drum solo, and jagged streaks of lightning illuminated the sky in stark, momentary flashes. Leo pulled his worn hood up and began the long trek to the bus stop. Maya would be waiting at her after-school program, and he hated to be late. She was a creature of routine, and any disruption, especially in bad weather, made her anxious. But the storm had other plans. When he finally reached his usual bus stop, a small crowd of commuters huddled under the meager shelter of a bus stop sign. A digital display flickered erratically. Route 47, diverted, fallen trees, flooding, seek alternate transport. Leo felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Alternate transport. In this weather, taxis were non-existent ride-shares surging to astronomical prices he couldn't afford. His phone, old and barely holding a charge, was dead. He had no choice. He had to walk. The fastest route meant cutting through parts of the city he usually avoided, areas that even on a sunny day had an air of desolation and unspoken danger. Tonight, under the onslaught of the storm, they would be truly treacherous. He pulled his worn hoodie tighter, hunching his shoulders against the driving rain and biting wind. The familiar streets quickly gave way to narrower, darker avenues. The streetlights flickered erratically, some plunging into complete darkness, casting long, dancing shadows. The rhythmic slap of his work boots against the wet pavement was the only constant sound, punctuated by the roar of the wind and the distant wail of sirens. Abandoned cars, some half submerged in newly formed puddles, lined the curbs. Buildings, their windows broken and boarded, loomed like skeletal giants against the bruised sky. This wasn't just economically depressed. This was forgotten. He picked up his pace, an urgency burning in his gut. Every instinct screamed at him to focus on Maya, to get to her as quickly and safely as possible. He was a single father, his child dependent solely on him. Walking into trouble here now would be a catastrophic failure. Then he heard it. A muffled shout, sharp and sudden, followed by a woman's terrified cry. It came from a narrow, unlit alleyway just ahead, obscured by overflowing dumpsters and shadow. Leo froze. His first overwhelming instinct was to keep walking, to pretend he hadn't heard, to disappear into the anonymity of the storm. He understood the dangers of this neighborhood, the unspoken rules of survival. Involvement meant risk, and risk meant jeopardizing Maya. Fear for his own safety and by extension Maya's caused him to hesitate for a crucial moment, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pictured Maya alone and anxious in the dark school building waiting for him. But then the woman's scream came again, raw with terror, a desperate sound that pierced through the roar of the wind and rain, cutting through Leo's self-preservation. It was a primal, gut-wrenching sound that resonated with a deeper, long-suppressed memory within him. A vivid, almost forgotten fragment flashed through his mind. Blinding lights, the acrid smell of smoke. A distant cry for help, he couldn't answer a crushing sense of helplessness. He had failed to act then, or rather, had been unable to. He had promised himself silently, fiercely, that he would never feel that kind of helplessness again. His hesitation evaporated, replaced by a cold, righteous fury. The thought of leaving someone in distress, especially a woman, was anathema to him. His hands balled into fists, his jaw tightened. Maya would be okay for a little longer. This woman, however, might not. Overcoming his profound hesitation, a deep-seated sense of responsibility overriding his fear, Leo veered sharply into the dark, rain-slicked alley. The stench of stale garbage and damp concrete assailed him. In the dim, flickering light from a distant neon sign, he saw them, two shadowy figures, their faces obscured by hoodies, grappling with a woman. She was struggling desperately, clutching a sleek, expensive-looking briefcase to her chest, trying to fend off their grasping hands. One of them, taller and more aggressive, twisted her arm, grunting, "Give it up, lady, it ain't worth it." Without a second thought, a primal roar escaping his own throat, Leo charged. He was no brawler, no street fighter, but his years of construction work had given him immense physical strength, and his past, glimpsed only in fragmented memories, had honed a surprising agility. He slammed into the taller assailant, a tackle more than a punch, sending the man sprawling into a pile of overflowing trash bags with a yelp of surprise. The second assailant, momentarily stunned, loosened his grip on the woman. Leo didn't waste the opportunity. He spun his body, moving with a fluid, unexpected grace. He didn't throw a single punch, but instead used his weight and momentum to unbalance the second man, grabbing his arm and twisting it, forcing him to release the woman and stumble backward, howling in pain. The two assailants, clearly expecting an easy mark, were completely caught off guard by Leo's sudden, fierce intervention. They scrambled to their feet, glaring at him, but the surprise had turned into a mix of fear and confusion. "Freak!" one of them snarled, but they clearly wanted no more of this unexpected resistance. With a frustrated curse, they turned and melted back into the shadows of the alley, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. The woman, breathless and shaking, leaned against the damp brick wall, her chest heaving, her fingers still clenched tightly around her briefcase. Her designer suit was disheveled, her expensive hair plastered to her face, but she was safe. Leo stood, panting, his knuckles scraped, his heart still thundering. His life had just taken a dangerous, irreversible turn. His decision to help had thrust him directly into a situation far beyond the mundane struggles of his normal life, creating a problem he couldn't simply walk away from. He had seen the danger she was in, and now he felt a responsibility for her safety, a quiet, insistent burden that would reshape everything. The alley reeked of stale beer and rain-soaked garbage, but to Eleanor Vance, the CEO of Vance Holdings, it smelled like a near catastrophe. Her heart still hammered against her ribs, the echoes of the assault vibrating through her. She was a woman accustomed to control, to boardrooms and balance sheets, not dimly lit alleyways and muggers. As she finally caught her breath, she looked at her rescuer, a man who seemed entirely out of place in her world, yet perfectly at ease in this one. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a little shaky. You didn't have to do that." Leo, still breathing heavily. His knuckles scraped where they'd connected with the asphalt, simply nodded. The adrenaline was slowly receding, leaving a familiar sense of detachment. "It's not safe for you to be out here alone, especially tonight," he said, his voice calm, pragmatic. He glanced at her expensive, custom-made suit, now disheveled and splattered with mud, and the designer briefcase she clutched like a lifeline. She was clearly lost, utterly out of her element. "Where are you headed?" Eleanor hesitated. Admitting she was utterly disoriented in this part of the city, miles from her downtown penthouse, felt like a concession of weakness. "My car. It broke down a few blocks back. I was trying to find a main street to flag a taxi." Her voice trailed off, a hint of embarrassment in her tone. "No taxis out here in this Leo stated, his gaze sweeping the deserted street. "I'll walk you to where you can get one." It wasn't a question, but a quiet, firm declaration. He had intervened, and now a silent sense of responsibility settled over him. He knew the dangers of this part of town, especially for someone so clearly vulnerable. As they began to navigate the storm-battered streets, dodging fallen debris and dark flooded alleys, Eleanor began to observe Leo more closely. He wasn't just walking, he was moving with an uncanny awareness of his surroundings. His eyes constantly scanned not with overt paranoia, but with an almost subconscious vigilance. He identified shortcuts through narrow passages, sidestepping hidden potholes and crumbling sections of pavement, as if he had a mental map of every crack and crevice. He seemed to sense dangers before they materialized. As they passed a crumbling building, a loose sign above them suddenly groaned, swaying precariously in the wind. Before Eleanor could even react, Leo's hand was on her back, gently but firmly guiding her forward just as the sign crashed down behind them with a deafening clang. Later, a broken streetlight ahead sparked dangerously, its exposed wires spitting blue electricity onto the wet sidewalk. Without a word, Leo deftly stepped forward, using a discarded piece of wood to carefully knock the live wire away, his movements controlled and precise. He radiated a calm confidence that was baffling for a man he assumed was a simple construction worker. He was quiet, unassuming, yet every action bespoke a competence that went far beyond mere street smarts. Eleanor, initially preoccupied with her own ordeal, found herself increasingly intrigued. This wasn't just kindness, this was skill. She, a CEO who prided herself on being an astute judge of character, had initially dismissed him as a kind but simple man from a rough neighborhood. But as he effortlessly guided her through the treacherous conditions, she began to see glimpses of something more. He wasn't just physically capable, he was intuitively aware, almost preternaturally perceptive. Eleanor was the primary witness to Leo's surprising capabilities. She watched him move with a controlled, almost tactical gait, his eyes missing nothing. She saw his protective instincts when he subtly shifted his body to shield her from a sudden gust of wind that sent loose trash flying. She also saw his quiet compassion. When further down the street they came across a stray cat, its leg caught in some discarded netting. Without hesitation, Leo knelt, his large calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he carefully untangled the terrified animal, soothing it with soft murmurs before it darted away. Eleanor, a woman who often viewed the world through the lens of profit and loss, found herself strangely moved by this quiet act of empathy. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to either of them, a shadowy figure had been observing Eleanor from a distance, tailing her since her car broke down. This individual, a low-level operative named Silas, was a disgruntled former employee of Vance Holdings, now working as a spy for a rival firm. He had been sent to track Eleanor to gather intelligence, and perhaps to exploit her vulnerability. Silas, hidden in the labyrinthine alleys, had witnessed the entire incident. The mugging, Leo's unexpected intervention, and his surprisingly efficient handling of the situation. He saw Leo move with a precision that belied his unassuming appearance, a man who seemed to know how to handle himself in a way that was anything but civilian. Silas, his face grim, quickly pulled out a secure satellite phone and began dictating a detailed report to his superior. The report landed on the desk of Julian Croft, CEO of Sterling Developments, a ruthless and ambitious rival of Vance Holdings. Croft, antagonist type A, was driven by insatiable greed, obsessed with acquiring Eleanor's company through any means necessary, including corporate espionage and destabilization. He had been pulling strings, manipulating the market, and feeding misinformation to undermine Vance Holdings for months. The idea that Eleanor had been mugged in a bad neighborhood was to him a minor inconvenience, perhaps even an opportunity. But then he read Silas's report about the Good Samaritan. Croft's initial annoyance quickly morphed into an intrigued suspicion. "He just fended them off," Croft muttered, rereading the report. "Too clean, too efficient. For a construction worker, no." He saw Leo's actions as too calculated, too skilled for a mere passerby. A random act of kindness. Croft didn't believe in random kindness. He only believed in leverage and manipulation. He suspected Leo might be an operative Eleanor had somehow hired, despite her current disoriented state, a secret weapon she was deploying. The thought rankled him. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Find everything there is to know about this Leo Maxwell," he ordered his assistant, his voice chillingly calm. "His finances, his family, his history, Every detail. No stone unturned. He paused, a cruel smile forming on his lips. If he's a pawn, I want to know who controls him. If he's just a nuisance, I'll find a way to remove him. He didn't see Leo as a hero, but as a potential unknown variable in his grand scheme, a variable that needed to be either controlled or eliminated. Julian Croft was a master manipulator, and this unexpected wrinkle in his plans would be dealt with one way or another. By the time Leo had walked Eleanor to a more populated intersection where a few beleaguered taxis were finally appearing, the storm had begun to subside. Eleanor looked at him truly, seeing him for the first time, not as a random stranger, but as a silent, formidable presence. "Leo Maxwell," she said, committing his name to memory. "I won't forget this. Anything I can do to repay you, please." Leo simply smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened the lines of his weary face. "Just get home safe, ma'am," he said, turning to hail a cab for her. "And maybe," he added, a glimmer of hope in his eyes, "think about my neighborhood. It could use some help, not just from storms." He was unaware of the dangerous web he had just become entangled in, nor the ruthless ambition of the man now meticulously digging into his past. The morning after the storm, Eleanor Vance, despite the lingering aches and the profound disruption to her meticulously ordered life, felt an unfamiliar stir of intrigue. Leo Maxwell. The name, simple and unassuming, echoed in her mind. His quiet strength, his almost preternatural ability to navigate danger, and his humble request for her to think about his neighborhood had lodged themselves in her consciousness. It was a refreshing anomaly in her world of corporate machinations and calculated self-interest. She had already tasked her assistant with a discreet investigation into the community's infrastructure, needs a promise she intended to keep. But as Eleanor delved back into the cutthroat world of corporate real estate, a subtle disquiet began to gnaw at her. Her rival Julian Croft seemed to be moving with unusual aggression. Deals that were supposedly secured for Vance Holdings suddenly fell through, vital information leaked, and key investors grew wary. She knew Croft was ruthless, but this felt different, more coordinated, almost as if he were operating with inside knowledge. Unbeknownst to Eleanor, Croft had indeed acquired damning knowledge specifically about Leo. Silas's report had detailed Leo's seemingly uncharacteristic combat prowess, sparking Croft's paranoia. His subsequent deeper dive into Leo's background, though hitting many dead ends due to Leo's carefully constructed anonymity, had unearthed enough fragmented information to confirm Croft's suspicion Leo Maxwell was no ordinary construction worker. The faded tattoo, the lack of digital footprint, the precise movements described by Silas, it all pointed to a past in some form of specialized, perhaps clandestine operations. Croft, a man who saw everyone as a potential pawn or threat, immediately recognized Leo's potential as a problem, or more deviously as a weapon. He saw the connection. Leo lived in the bad neighborhood Eleanor had expressed interest in. A plan as insidious as it was, brilliant, began to form in Croft's mind. He wouldn't attack Eleanor directly. He would attack her newfound sentimental interest, Leo's community. By making that neighborhood untenable, by making Leo regret his altruism, he could subtly undermine Eleanor, distract her, and perhaps even force her hand in his corporate takeover. Croft placed a call not to a mercenary, but to a figure who controlled the shadows of the very neighborhood. Leo called home Marcus Kingpin Thorne. Kingpin antagonist Type B was not inherently evil, but a product of his environment, ambitious and ruthless within his own domain, his loyalty bought by cold hard cash and the promise of expanded territory. He controlled the flow of illicit goods, intimidated rivals, and enforced a brutal self-serving order. He had a reputation for getting things done, for clearing out undesirables when the price was right. Croft offered Kingpin a significant, seemingly legitimate financial incentive, a large sum of cash ostensibly for urban renewal consultation in the area, with the unspoken understanding that the renewal involved driving out current residents to pave the way for future Croft-controlled development. "Clean out the old, bring in the new Kingpin?" Croft purred over the phone, his voice smooth as silk. "I want that area, ready for my vision." He framed it as a win-win. Kingpin got rich and Croft got leverage against Eleanor, who would be forced to abandon her pet project. Kingpin, blinded by the promised money and the chance to expand his territorial influence, readily agreed. He didn't care about Croft's deeper motives. He only saw the opportunity for power and profit. The arena for Leo's ultimate test became his own home, his apartment building, and his entire neighborhood. This was where he had painstakingly carved out a life for himself and Maya, a place he loved, despite its imperfections, a sanctuary from his past. Now it was systematically being undermined, turning his refuge into a battlefield. The quiet streets he walked daily became volatile. Familiar faces, once friendly, now looked at him with wary eyes as the subtle pressure began. Graffiti appeared on walls, windows in abandoned buildings were smashed, and late-night gatherings grew louder, more menacing. Every familiar street, every corner store became a potential site of conflict, a symbol of his struggle to maintain his dignity and protect his family. Leo quickly noticed the shift. The harassment from Kingpin's gang intensified rapidly, insidious at first, then escalating into overt threats. First, anonymous notes slipped under doors warning residents to leave. Then vandalism, graffiti scrawled across his own apartment door. Tires slashed on a neighbor's car. Subtle intimidation tactics followed, gang members loitering menacingly on street corners, glaring at residents playing loud music late into the night. It was all designed to create an atmosphere of fear to force families to abandon their homes. Leo found himself caught in a devastating pincer movement. On one hand, Eleanor's corporate battles, which he now inadvertently understood more about due to her casual trusting conversations during their one brief encounter, were escalating, hinting at a larger conspiracy. On the other, the direct, immediate threat from the local gang made his daily life a living hell. He couldn't involve Eleanor directly. She was too preoccupied with her own company's internal turmoil and might not even believe him about Croft's manipulation of the local gang. Besides, he didn't want to drag her into the mess or put Maya at risk by revealing the depth of the danger he was truly facing. He was the quiet protector, forced to confront two seemingly disparate threats alone. The local police, already stretched thin and wary of outside interference in internal gang disputes, were slow to respond effectively to his nuanced complaints, dismissing them as typical neighborhood issues. They were Type B antagonists, not malicious but limited by their own biases and lack of understanding of the true undercurrents. Croft, meanwhile, tightened the screws. He gave Kingpin a strict deadline: clear the neighborhood within a week. The pressure on Leo was immense. He had to act decisively and fast before his community was utterly destroyed and Maya's safety was irreparably compromised. He saw Maya drawing quietly at the kitchen table, innocent and oblivious to the escalating danger, and a fierce primal resolve hardened within him. He would not let this happen. He would protect his home, his daughter, and his community. The time for quiet dignity was over. The time for action was now. The sky wept, mirroring the despair that hung heavy over Leo's neighborhood. Rain lashed down in thick, angry sheets, turning the dilapidated streets into dark, churning rivers. It was the night Kingpin's gang chose for their final aggressive push. Emboldened by Julian Croft's escalating payments, and unaware that they were merely pawns in a grander corporate scheme, they descended upon Leo's apartment building with a terrifying resolve. Fires, small at first, then blossoming into menacing orange flowers, erupted in abandoned lots. Windows shattered with sickening uniformity, the sound swallowed by the storm. Shouts, crude and threatening, filled the air, carried on the wind. Residents, terrified, peered through their curtains, some already packing what little they had. But Leo had prepared. For days he had moved with a quiet, methodical intensity, drawing on skills he had hoped he'd never need again. His knowledge of the neighborhood's intricate layout, every alley, every shortcut, every blind spot became his tactical map. He had subtly directed his neighbors, Mrs. Gable, the young mothers, the weary men, to the safest parts of the building, instructing them to stay low, to remain silent. He had set up crude but effective diversions tripwires, connected to stacks of empty cans near potential entry points, unsecured trash bins positioned to create noise and block pathways. He heard the roar of engines, the screech of tires as Kingpin's battered vans pulled up to the curb. Figures dark and menacing spilled out their faces, obscured by the driving rain and the hoods of their jackets. They moved with a predatory confidence, smashing ground floor windows, their voices thick with intimidation. Leo watched from a darkened window on the second floor. His heart pounded, but his mind was crystal clear, a calm island in the storm of chaos. He was hopelessly outnumbered, a single man against a coordinated gang, but Maya was hiding in their apartment's reinforced pantry, clutching her worn teddy bear. Her safety was his only objective. He moved through the apartment building like a phantom, a whisper in the shadows. He activated his diversions, sending cans clattering, drawing the gang's attention to empty stairwells, while he guided terrified families to exits they hadn't known existed. He intercepted gang members, not with brute force, but with quick, precise movements that disarmed them, sent them sprawling, or subtly altered their course. This wasn't an act of desperate bravado. It was a carefully orchestrated defense executed with a fluidity and discipline that spoke volumes of his obscured past, a past in military or specialized security training that had honed him into a quiet, formidable force. The breathless moment arrived as Kingpin himself, a hulking figure whose presence radiated menace, burst through the main entrance of the apartment building, followed by his two most aggressive enforcers. He was screaming orders, his voice raw with a desperate ambition, unaware of the corporate puppet master pulling his strings. "Find them, burn them out. Get everyone out of here." Kingpin spotted Leo momentarily exposed as he secured a resident behind a reinforced door. Kingpin snarled, raising a heavy crowbar, ready to deliver a crushing blow that would silence the unexpected resistance. He was about to set a final devastating fire that would ensure the neighborhood was cleared once and for all. But just as Kingpin swung a luxury SUV, its headlights cutting through the downpour, like twin lasers, screeched to a halt at the curb. Eleanor Vance, her face etched with grim determination, emerged from the passenger seat. She had grown increasingly suspicious of Croft's unusual aggression and the strange coincidence of Leo's neighborhood being targeted. Following a trail of clues from her own corporate investigation, unusual financial transfers, hushed conversations intercepted by her security team, she had narrowed down Croft's latest scheme. She was accompanied by 2 loyal security personnel, but they were still vastly outnumbered. Eleanor stood for a moment stunned. She saw Leo silhouetted against the flickering light of a distant fire, moving with a grace that defied his blue-collar attire, deftly disarming one of Kingpin's enforcers, his movements precise and lethal. He was not a simple construction worker. He was a highly trained individual, a ghost of a warrior. "Leo!" she cried, her voice barely audible over the storm. Leo heard her. His mind processed her unexpected presence, analyzing it as a potential breakthrough. He couldn't risk her getting involved directly, but he could use her. As he parried Kingpin's crowbar, forcing the gang leader off balance, Leo saw an opportunity. Kingpin's phone, which he had seen the man using earlier, was partially visible in his coat pocket, illuminated by the flashing lights of a distant emergency vehicle. With a risky but precise maneuver, Leo spun away from Kingpin, seemingly retreating. As he moved, he threw a small improvised flashbang, concocted from a few high-powered fireworks he'd found in a discarded box, towards the densest group of Kingpin's men. The explosion was blinding, a deafening crack that momentarily disoriented the gang, giving Eleanor's security personnel crucial seconds to react and form a defensive perimeter around her. Then, as Kingpin reeled from the flashbang, Leo returned faster and more direct. He engaged Kingpin in a brutal, personal hand-to-hand fight. It was a visceral dance of strength and practiced technique. Leo didn't aim to kill, but to subdue, using Kingpin's own momentum against him, dodging a wild swing, then delivering a precise strike to the man's solar plexus, followed by a swift, calculated sweep that sent Kingpin crashing to the soaking wet floor. As Kingpin lay stunned, Leo deftly reached into his pocket, grabbed his phone, and with lightning speed scrolled through a brief call log, illuminating a recent call from Croft J., and a series of text messages discussing payments and clearing operations. He then subtly angled the screen towards Eleanor, who was now being protected by her security. Eleanor, her initial shock giving way to fury, saw it. The damning evidence on Kingpin's phone, illuminated by the distant flashing police lights, was undeniable. Croft's direct orders, the financial transactions. It all confirmed her worst suspicions. Her skepticism about Croft's true involvement in the neighborhood's troubles shattered, replaced by a cold, righteous anger. She immediately pulled out her own phone, now fully connected, and called the police, giving them irrefutable evidence of Julian Croft's direct involvement and Kingpin's specific orders. "We have them, officer," she stated, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "And we have proof of who's behind this, and a hero who just saved this entire block." Just as the first sirens wailed closer, a cascade of blue and red lights painting the rain-slicked streets, the local police arrived. This time, they were led by a newly assigned, more perceptive officer, Sergeant Evans' antagonist, Type B, who had been skeptical of the initial biased reports. He saw the chaotic aftermath, the defeated gang members, the subdued kingpin groaning on the floor, the distraught but safe residents huddled in doorways, and Leo standing battered but victorious, guarding his community. Sergeant Evans, initially wary of the gang violence, quickly assessed the scene. He saw Leo's controlled actions the protection of the residents, and the clear damning evidence Eleanor now presented to him. His skepticism transformed into profound respect. He understood Leo's true nature as a protector, not a participant in the chaos. Julian Croft, watching from afar through his own discreet surveillance cameras, saw his elaborate plan utterly fail. His pawns were defeated, his culpability exposed. The monitor screen flickered, reflecting his own enraged, defeated face. The once bad neighborhood was no longer a target. It had become a battlefield where an unseen hero had risen, and Croft's empire was about to crumble. The first light of morning, soft and cleansing, began to break through the lingering clouds, illuminating the aftermath of the night's chaos. Police vehicles, their emergency lights still pulsing, lined the street. Sirens wailed distantly as ambulances tended to a few minor injuries. The air, once thick with tension, now carried the distinct smell of wet asphalt in relief. Sheriff Sergeant Evans, his face no longer skeptical, but etched with a profound sense of respect, approached Leo. "Mr. Maxwell," he said, his voice quiet. "What you did last night, it was extraordinary. You protected this community. We had no idea the depth of what you were up against." He extended his hand, and this time there was no hesitation from Leo. It was a handshake of mutual understanding and burgeoning trust. Evans himself was a changed man, humbled by the blatant manipulation he had almost fallen prey to. He publicly apologized to Leo and the neighborhood, acknowledging the systemic failures of the police to truly understand the struggles of this community and committing to rebuild that broken trust. He immediately implemented new community policing initiatives, assigning a dedicated team to the area, promising to be a visible and responsive presence. Julian Croft, antagonist Type A, found hiding in a maintenance shed a few blocks away, was arrested without further incident. The evidence from Kingpin's phone, coupled with Eleanor's detailed testimony and her firm's own internal investigation, created an undeniable mountain of proof. Croft faced a barrage of charges: corporate espionage, fraud, incitement to violence, and attempted racketeering. His corporate empire, built on ruthless ambition and a disregard for human cost, crumbled swiftly. Board members, horrified by the public scandal and the depths of his depravity, swiftly moved to oust him. He lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom, a just and proportionate consequence for his insatiable greed and the chaos he had wrought. He was destined for a long, ignominious fall from grace. Kingpin antagonist Type B, battered but alive, was also taken into custody. Eleanor, ever pragmatic but also touched by Leo's quiet compassion, ensured that while he faced the full legal consequences of his actions, the context of Croft's manipulation was also considered. She saw a path for him beyond mere incarceration. Thanks to her intervention, Kingpin would not only face justice, but also be directed towards intensive rehabilitation and community service programs, offering him a genuine chance at redemption, a stark contrast to Croft's absolute downfall. Weeks melted into a month. The sounds of police sirens were replaced by the rhythmic hum of construction. Eleanor Vance, profoundly moved by Leo's actions and the stark reality of his neighborhood's plight, had made good on her word. She leveraged Vance Holdings' considerable resources not for a cynical takeover, but for a major ethical urban revitalization project. It wasn't about gentrification, it was about empowerment. Her firm initiated plans for affordable housing, job training centers, a new community clinic, and green spaces, ensuring that the residents themselves had a powerful voice in every step of the process. Eleanor offered Leo a key leadership position within this project. "You know this community, Leo," she told him during a meeting in his newly repaired apartment. "You understand its needs, its strengths. You have the integrity, and frankly the quiet strength to lead this. Not as a symbolic gesture, but because you are invaluable." It was more than a job. It was a chance for Leo to actively rebuild his home, to shape the future of the place he fiercely protected. He accepted, a quiet sense of purpose settling deep within him. One quiet afternoon, amidst the sounds of hammering and distant laughter from children playing in a newly cleared lot, Leo and Eleanor shared a rare moment of peace on the porch of his now secure apartment. He held a mug of coffee, she a cup of herbal tea. The sun, finally present and warm, filtered through the leaves of a newly planted sapling. "You know," Eleanor began, a contemplative tone in her voice, "when I first met you, I saw a kind man, but I judged. I saw the neighborhood, I saw the construction clothes. I made assumptions." She looked at him, her gaze direct and honest. "I saw you as a simple man from a bad neighborhood. I was wrong. You are anything but simple. And this neighborhood, because of people like you, is anything but bad." Leo simply smiled, a rare, unburdened smile that reached his eyes. "We all make assumptions, Eleanor. I saw you as a powerful CEO, probably didn't think twice about the folks struggling out here." He paused, then continued, "My past, I tried to bury it. Tried to be just Leo the dad. But it turns out the skills I learned, the things I tried to forget, they became the key to protecting my present. To building a better future, not just for Maya and me, but for everyone around us." Eleanor nodded, understanding. "Sometimes the biggest strengths are the ones we try hardest to hide." A genuine, respectful bond had formed between them, forged in the crucible of shared danger and mutual respect. The conversation flowed easily, a testament to a connection deeper than corporate titles or social strata. The cabin was quiet once more, but it was a different kind of quiet. A calm, born of earned peace, not forced isolation. The storm had passed, leaving behind not just destruction, but the fertile ground for new beginnings, cultivated by the quiet dignity of a single father who became an unexpected hero. 2 years later, the neighborhood, once dismissed as bad by the outside world, pulsed with a vibrant, undeniable energy. It was a testament to transformation, a living, breathing example of what could be achieved when dignity, dedication, and genuine investment took root. New, brightly painted buildings stood proudly alongside meticulously renovated old ones, their facades gleaming in the sunlight. The air, once heavy with the unspoken struggles of its residents, now hummed with the joyful sounds of children playing, the cheerful chatter of neighbors, and the distant rhythmic hum of progress. Maya, now 10, thrived. The new community school, a state-of-the-art facility built on what was once a derelict lot, hummed with activity. She walked to school each morning with a gaggle of friends, her laughter bright, and unburdened her mind alight with new discoveries. She was a confident, curious girl, untouched by the shadows that had once threatened their peace, a future brimming with possibility stretched out before her. Leo Maxwell was no longer just a single dad struggling to make ends meet. He was a respected figure, a pillar of his revitalized community, and an invaluable asset to Vance Holdings. His office, a modest but functional space in the new community center, was a hub of activity. He oversaw the ongoing revitalization projects, his quiet dignity and unwavering strength guiding every decision. He ensured that every new development honored the history and spirit of the existing residents. His integrity, a powerful counterpoint to the ruthless greed he had once encountered. He was no longer just managing construction. He was building a legacy, one of opportunity and empowerment. His almost illegible tattoo, once a hidden mark of a buried past, was now a visible emblem, a testament to his journey. He often wore short-sleeved shirts in the warmer months, and the tattoo, a discrete geometric symbol, was now clearly visible on his forearm. It was the symbol of an elite, clandestine humanitarian task force. He had once been a part of a unit dedicated to quiet, high-stakes interventions in global crises. He now openly acknowledged this past, not with bravado, but with a calm acceptance, using his experiences to fuel his present purpose. He often lectured at universities, sharing his insights on urban resilience and community empowerment, his unique perspective captivating audiences. Beyond his professional role, Leo had poured his heart into giving back. He established a nonprofit foundation partially funded by Eleanor Vance called the Unseen Architects. Its mission was simple, yet profound, to provide job training and educational opportunities for at-risk youth in underserved communities, ensuring they had the tools and resources to build their own futures. He mentored young men and women, sharing practical skills, but more importantly, imparting lessons in self-reliance, integrity, and the quiet power of making a difference even when no one was watching. He held workshops in the newly built community center, teaching everything from basic carpentry to conflict resolution, using his own experiences as a testament to the power of transformation. The story culminates on a warm, late afternoon. Leo and Maya stood on the newly rebuilt community playground, its brightly colored equipment teeming with laughing children. The air was filled with the joyful cacophony of play. Maya pointed to a thriving community garden, a vibrant oasis of green life, nestled amidst the bustling urban landscape where neighbors tended rows of fresh vegetables. "Look, Papa!" Maya exclaimed, her voice bright. "The tomatoes are almost ready." Leo smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes, reflecting the golden sunlight. He put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. The once bad neighborhood was now a testament to transformation, a beacon of what could be achieved when unseen heroes stepped forward, when kindness triumphed over greed, and when a single dad unknowingly walked a CEO home, setting in motion a chain of events that rebuilt not just a community, but countless lives. The sun dipped lower, casting long, peaceful shadows over the revitalized streets, a silent, powerful testament to the quiet strength of an unseen architect. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining our journey.